Here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, me and Papa Persolaise to talk to you guys about the 2000s. We're going to talk about a time that is very, very hard to come up with 5 fragrances to summarize that particular decade. I know it was very hard for me, and I think it was equally as hard and almost impossible to just narrow it down to 5 fragrances that were, you know, the best of the 2000s. What would you say, Persolaise?
Hi, Max. Hi, everybody. Well, as always, thanks for having me. No, this was really, really nasty for 2 main reasons. Number one, that actually there was a lot of good stuff released in the noughties, as we call them here. But number 2, there was also just so much stuff released that you had to keep going through these lists and going, yeah, this is out, this is out. There's no way, because this seemed to be the decade where brands thought, why release 1 perfume when you can release 7, you know? And
Very
so
true.
there were these collections where you go, why did they do this? Who thought this would be a good idea? Nobody's going to remember these perfumes in a few years' time. But this was hard. Coming up with 5 was really
brutal. It was brutal. And this was equally as hard because when you look back in the 70s, 80s, 90s that we did, you know, this is episode 4. By the way, stay tuned for episode 5, which we'll do also the 2010s, is because this is the time where I became really enamored with niche. So now you're going to see some niche fragrances on these lists. So it was very hard. It was just even harder because now I'm not just looking at designers. I'm looking at designers and I'm looking at niche. And it just becomes this plethora of stuff to choose from. And what are you going to leave off when you only have 5 to choose from? But anyway, quick summary, as we always do. The 2000s began on January 1st, 2000 and ended on December 31st, 2009. Everybody remembered the Y2K, where we thought the computers were going to vanish and just, you know, break down. I remember this whole thing of the Y2K. China became a giant with producing things, you know, just incredible hip growth. You know, MP4, computer, you know, technology explosion. You know, we had stuff like MySpace.com, you know, Facebook started in 2007, 2008. And it just, you know, you knew that things were going to change. You knew that that decade was really the beginning of something big to come. What would you say, Dariush?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we did our 90s video, we talked about the start of certain things, like, for example, the start of the internet. But the internet hadn't completely taken over our lives by the end of the 90s. Whereas in the beginning of the 21st century, by the end of that first decade, it was starting to become harder and harder to function in the modern world if you didn't have the internet. Smartphones, mobile phones, you know, cell phones, all of that sort of thing. But also a time, I think, of greater conservatism in a way. You know, there were obviously there was an awful thing that happened in your city, wasn't there, at the beginning of the century? We all know what we're talking about, and that kind of coloured the whole of the rest of that decade, didn't it? And so maybe that frivolity of the 90s felt like it had to be toned down a bit, I think.
Yeah, we talked about in the 90s the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that was huge, but that was actually a good thing. And then obviously we had this horrific event that took place on 9/11, which I don't want us to really talk much about it, but it's something that the world will never forget. You know, it was really, really sad, you know. But anyway, as far as cultural fashion, you know, it was a very expressive time. I think, you know, you talked about the cell phones. We had Razr flip phones, which were very popular. But then the iPhone came out in 2006, and then it just took the world by storm because we went from just texting, which was a very innovative feature, to then having everything at your fingertips, your email, you know, YouTube and all that stuff. You know, it just became a new world. You know, it just became new experiences, new opportunities. And here we are, you know. What were the most prevalent things in the UK? Can you pinpoint maybe some of the things that, you know, as far as fashion culture, you know, the clothing, you know, what comes to mind in the 2000s?
I guess, number one, maybe it's not far enough away for us yet to make a complete assessment, but to me, it was a time marked, and we touched on this when we were doing our 90s video, because it seemed to be the beginning of this, but it was real small splinter groups forming. So you know how in the same way that if you go back a few decades, there were only maybe 2 or 3 TV channels, and everybody used to watch the same things, and you had the same frames of reference. At the beginning of this century, maybe because of the internet, maybe because of more channels being available, you didn't have those points of commonality anymore. And I think the same was the case with fashion, with tastes in music, with tastes in movies. You could go and pursue your own niche tastes. And so I guess that's why it's hard to pick out an overriding thing. If there was one thing, I suppose we were then in that decade, I think, seeing the beginning of what we would now call gender fluidity, even though it wasn't necessarily called that then. The niche perfume world latched onto that idea, of course, because they really pushed this concept of unisex perfumes out to the fore. So I suppose that's the main thing, you know, barriers breaking down.
I agree. I think barrier breaking is a great way to put it. As far as like fashion goes, I think of crop tops, I think of hoodies, low-rise jeans, cargo pants, Daisy Dukes, ribbed sweaters, UGG boots, the UGG boots. They were very popular here. Sneakers, you know, that was like the fashion. And then when it comes to movies, Spider-Man franchise was huge. Harry Potter saga, the Lord of the Rings. I think those were like the most, you know, important movies that I can think of that were really big here. And then music-wise, Outkast, Usher, Destiny's Child, Lady Gaga, 50 Cent, Shakira, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, to name a few, I think were the most, you know, prevalent artists of that decade in particular. So, yeah. Anything else you want to mention? Any other musicians or celebrities that you think were very popular in the 2000s?
No, I think you covered it. I think those are the main ones then, really, weren't they? With global reach, yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's get cracking. Let's start with your first pick in the 2000s. Very, very curious. Again, we're going to do this chronologically for you guys in the order that they were released. So with your first pick, Persolaise.
Absolutely. And I guess we should remind people as well that we don't know each other's choices, which is why when you're about to do yours and I'm kind of going like this, it's because I genuinely don't know. Well, when we did our 90s video, actually, one thing I should say as well, one reason why this was so hard and one way that I tried to make this a little bit easier for myself was that I thought, okay, do not include perfumes that have been discontinued and do not include perfumes that are not in great shape in their current form, because I thought otherwise this is going to be completely unmanageable, even though that's going to be a bit controversial when we get to perfume number 4. But when we were doing our 90s video, I said that the 90s really were the decade for Serge Lutens. And the noughties, this decade that we're doing now, were absolutely the decade for this particular brand. And the brand is Frederic Malle. Frederic Malle launched his perfumes in 2000. And he really ushered in the sort of modern day of independent perfumery, the modern age of independent perfumery, putting the perfumers' names on the bottles, really pushing this idea of taking classical codes and modernizing them. Of course, he has since then been bought out by Estee Lauder, but in the decade that we're talking about now, he was still very much an independent player. But the one that I've gone for is potentially going to be a bit controversial, because I haven't gone for Carnal Flower, which is the one that a lot of people love. So do I, but I have to pick one. I haven't gone for Geranium pour Monsieur, which again is one of the ones that people love. I've gone for one of the quieter ones.
Oh, okay.
I've gone for one from the original lineup from 2000. This is En Passant, which was composed by Olivia Jacobetti. Whenever you mention it to people, if they know it, they go, oh my goodness, it's amazing, it's extraordinary, but it doesn't otherwise seem to get a lot of attention. And I think that's criminally unfair. This must be one of the most beautiful florals ever made, certainly one of the most beautiful florals of this century. Oh, it's just the press material, you know, the blurb on the perfume calls it a lilac scent.
Wow.
And absolutely it is a lilac composition. But to me, I also always get a very, very strong note of Lily of the Valley. And Lily of the Valley is really tough to do well in perfumery, especially nowadays, because there's lots of materials that you're not allowed to use anymore in certain quantities or at all that evoke that Lily of the Valley illusion. It's It's really impressionistic. It works very, very cleverly with a kind of gently marine cucumber saline note, which adds a kind of dewy wateriness, almost mouth-watering, that ties in with these florals. And it's just the most perfectly named perfume as well, because it really feels like you're just catching these scents in passing, like you're walking past them and the breeze is just wafting these beautiful florals to you. It's so, so, so hard to make something feel so delicate and so gentle, and yet make it last and make it feel like it's got real presence and authority. It is absolutely stunning. And I don't know why Jacobetti never made anything more for Frederic Malle. Don't know what the reason was there. But
how would you translate the name into English? The one that passes by would be the translation?
It's just in passing.
Okay.
So you know, like, for example, you may be talking about something and you say, oh, I mentioned this in passing. That's what it means. And it really does have this feel of just something drifting past. It's stunning, and just you must try it. I'm guessing from the expression on your face that you don't know it. Oh.
I don't know that one. I do have a few references from Frederic Malle. I want to say I have about 10 or 12 right now. I do enjoy it very much. I love what they did. You know, the giving credit to the perfumier, which is something that wasn't really done before then, just having them in the bottle. And the funny thing is, when you said 2000, Frederic Malle, I was like, whoa, we're going to overlap right away. Because my pick is also from Frederic Malle, and it's also from 2000. But unlike you, that you went with a lighter scent, I actually went with a heavier scent, which happens to be, I think this was my second purchase of niche variety. I think my first was Reflection Man, and this was my second purchase ever of niche fragrances. And it's something that I remember blowing my mind, and I didn't particularly love it at first sniff. I thought it was a little harsh, a little too strong. But as I worked more and more, I fell in love with it. It just worked with me. And this is an earlier formulation. This is a vintage bottle of Musk Ravageur by Maurice Roussel, which is, to me, when it comes to the note of lavender, he is the master of lavender fragrances. This is incredible. I love lavender. This is not a barbershop at all. This goes into a very deep and darker territory. We're talking cloves, cinnamon, lavender, tangerine, tonka beans, vanilla, musk, obviously musk, amber, and you talked about Umber Sultan in our 90s video, and I think this is also another gorgeous ambery composition. But it's just so much more. There's just so much more elements in here. The dry down is like a gorgeous warm Cinnabon, a very delectable, almost gourmand territory. It's an explosion of flavors. Very, very bold, very, powerful fragrance, room filling, not for the faint of heart, but something that I absolutely adore. And I consider this a masterpiece. And it's definitely one of my favorites of all time. If I had to keep 10 niche fragrances, this would be one of the 10. Absolutely incredible. How do you like Musk Ravageur?
No, I mean, I completely agree. And in the same way that I said in the 90s video that I could have made a top 5 with Lutins, I could have made a top 5 with Frederic Malle, but you kind of have to draw the line somewhere. No, it's wonderful. Musk Ravageur is excellent as a kind of modern update of Shalimar. It works so well.
It smells of a fine liqueur, like something that you would drink, like a fine liqueur, like a whiskey, like an aged whiskey, or brandy.
It's very special. It's very, very special.
Very special. So what is your second pick? I'm very curious.
My second one takes us to 2002, and again in the spirit of sort of more independent perfumery. I mean, this wasn't an independent brand in the sense of, I mean, it's a huge company, but I love this perfume. This is from 2002. It's by Comme de Garcons, and it's from a series that they did of incense perfumes. They did a lot of series then. This was, so the incense series was series 3, and this is Avignon, composed by Bertrand Duchaufour, who was also making a huge name for himself in this decade. This, I think, is the best frankincense perfume ever. If you want that feeling of walking into a Catholic church where the incense has been, wafting around, nothing does it quite as well as Avignon. There are some that come close, but this is just it's just unbelievable. Every single time I smell it, I'm just blown away, because it completely makes you picture the incense and think of the incense, but it also makes you realize that there are facets in the incense that you hadn't appreciated, like, for example, a citrusy, lemony facet, but it's got absolutely everything you would want from a frankincense composition. So it's smoky, but in a very, very clean way. It's woody. It's got that mineralic, flinty feel. It's got the feeling of the wooden seats, the pews in the church. You can see the tendrils of smoke all coiling up, you know, into the ceiling, into the heavens. It's extremely meditative and calming and soothing and properly spiritual. It's something else. It's the whole incense series is really, really good from Comme des Garcons, but Avignon is exceptional. Again, one of these perfumes that I will never ever want to be without, and I always have to have a backup.
I agree with you, Persolaise, and I do have a bottle. And I think, you know, whenever people ask me, hey, what's a great incense fragrance, I always go with that one. I always tell them, go, like, if you want a perfect incense fragrance, one that encapsulates the incense, the church vibe, the almost spiritual kind of element, that is the one. That is like the best incense perfume ever made. And I do have Incense Avignon as well. And Comme des Garcons is a very underrated brand. I think they have some incredible releases, and that is one of them. Absolutely fantastic. Great choice. And that was from 2002.
2002. Yeah.
So funny enough, I'm also going to go with 2000. Now, we're going the same years, but we're going with different fragrances. And this particular one here is one that a lot of people say Alberto Maria's best creation was Acqua di Gio. I beg to differ. I think this is his masterpiece and best creation of all time, under the direction of, again, Tom Ford, which we talked about heavily on the 90s. He was just a great nose. I mean, a great creative director. When he briefed and gave people a summary of what he wanted, he was ahead of his time, as we saw with Envy, you know, in the 90s video. This one here was incredibly ahead of its time, so much so that it did so poorly in sales here in America that it was discontinued within the year. Like, it was released in 2002. By 2003, it was off the shelves, gone onto discounters.
Are you going M7?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That is the one.
Good.
But I also have to say that Jacques Cavalier, which is a great nose, was heavily involved in this. It was not just Alberto Maria's, but it was under the creative direction of Tom Ford. So this, to me, it screams Tom Ford Private Blend, which later on, 2005, started when he created his own fashion brand. This is just an incredible, voluptuous, luminous, you know, velvety, you know, oud scent. And oud was something that was not done here in US in the early 2000s. It was just not talked about. It wasn't until late 2000s that we started to see oud coming into this part of the world. This is just a masterpiece, ladies and gentlemen. You have an herbal orangey facet up top with a gorgeous oud and vetiver combination in the heart that is just the star player here. It's the oud laced vetiver with amber and musk. Very powerful, very heavy. This is a dark scent, a CEO, a boss. I can picture, you know, a CEO, a boss, you know, someone that's in control, in charge. Not for the faint of heart. Just like Musk Ravageur, you need to really appreciate heavier scents to appreciate this fragrance. I think people, when you smell this at first spray, it's gonna, you know, turn your nose a little bit, especially if you don't have a seasoned nose. But if you're somebody who's experienced heavier, powerful fragrances, if you like the note of oud, if you like vetiver, this fragrance is a mind-blowing type of a scent. I absolutely love this fragrance. I can't do without. This is another one that if I did a top 10 of life to keep, this would be there. Sadly discontinued. It was re-released in a different forms a couple of times, but those two formulations were nothing like this one. If you can manage to find, actually it was reformulated 3 times. They had another version of this with a clear cap and just a sticker in the back. It wasn't all brown. And then they came up with 2 different versions, which I'll pop up here on the screen once I edit this video. But this is the one you want to get. This is definitely the one you want to get. Very intricate, very elaborate, very private blend, you know, ahead of its time. niche quality for sure. What are your thoughts on M7, Dariush?
I got through so many bottles of M7. With me, it was love at first scent for M7. And had I known that it would be discontinued, because I wore this stuff like there was no tomorrow. And again, I think we talked about this in some other videos. It was a perfume that worked well in a lot of forms, because I remember I had not just the scent, but I had the deodorant, I had the shower gel, I had the aftershave balm and all this kind of stuff. Very, very controversial advertising campaign as well for that one.
It was a naked gentleman.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is,
it didn't do well. It didn't do well, did it? They had a flanker, didn't they, called M7 Fresh? And I think even when it came out again in different forms, it didn't do.
It flopped
so well. Yeah, but
it was a big flop.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
But really, the funny thing is, it was released in 2002, and I remember smelling it, I think, in 2003, and I didn't like it. And then a couple years later, I found it at, I think, a Marshall's or TJ Maxx, and it was on sale, very cheap. I think it was $19.99 or $29.99, and I picked up 2 bottles just for the heck of it. And I remember being blown away. I was like, why didn't I like this when I was in the store? It's very particular. It's very unique. It's very almost medicinal with this vetiver and oud combination. But it just it's something else. It's very sensual, very special, very powerful, very special. What is your third pick?
My third pick, we go to 2004, but it's the same perfumer that we've just been talking about. This is from L'Artisan Parfumeur, and Bertrand Duchaufour did quite a few for them, but I think this must be one of the finest things he's ever made for them, for anybody. And it's Timbuktu from L'Artisan Parfumeur. Not a million miles away from Avignon, in the sense that it has a sort of striking incense note. Most Bertrand Duchaufour compositions feature some incense in them, but this is really curious. I sort of worn this for a long time. Again, another one that I always want to have a backup bottle of. And it's one of these ones that you think you figure it out, and then you smell it again and you think, wow, I never saw this facet in there. Because it uses materials that you would expect to be really, really heavy, really opulent, maybe really overbearing, overwhelming. But what marks out this particular style of perfumery, and it was almost the start of this particular style of perfumery, is that these materials are made totally transparent, totally luminous, totally light-filled, and weightless, which is the kind of illusion that I think only perfumery can pull off. So you get woods, you get incense, you get smoke, you get resins, you get balsams, but it's almost as though they're constantly having air filtered through them, so that you're always breathing when you wear this perfume, or like they're having the coolest, clearest water flowing through them. It's like this real surreal sense of the transparent going through something that isn't transparent. It features a note of a material called cypriol, which I believe comes from papyrus, which has this very, very particular woody, leathery, dark, smoky note, because even though it's all of those things, it's also really, really clean. And cypriol is used a lot in oud compositions too. It's really, really fascinating, because even now I'm smelling it and I'm thinking, oh, there's almost like a kind of petrol, benzene, plasticky thing going on here that you think, oh, I never really smelled this before, because most of the time you think of it as smelling completely natural and completely outdoorsy. Very, very, very special, really, really special piece of work, and gets better as it goes along. The dry down is just out of this world.
I love Timbuktu, and as we talked about, Sheldrake, being in my top 5 noses of all time, Bertrand Duchaufour would also be in the top 5 of all time. Timbuktu is an exquisite fragrance, and when you look at the notes, you're absolutely right. You think of something a little heavier. I think it also has mango in it, but what you get there is a very green mango. You don't particularly get like a juicy mango. It's a very green, aromatic type of a fragrance, but absolutely incredible. It didn't quite make my list because, like I said, I wanted to keep stuff that were a little bit more meaningful to me, you know, and more groundbreaking in a sense. But absolutely stunning pick, absolutely incredible. My next pick here is from 2005, and to me, it's another groundbreaking fragrance. People call it the metrosexual of perfumes.
Oh, we're going to overlap, aren't we? We're going to overlap.
We're going to overlap. The version I have here is not the original 2005 version, even though it was released in 2005. This is actually a reformulation from 2011, and I'm talking about Dior Homme. So
mine is silver.
Yours is the original. See, a lot of times I joke with you because I show you the vintage stuff, and now you have one on me because I don't have a 2005 anymore. But this is absolutely stunning. I mean, Dior Homme is an incredible fragrance. You would be, you know, it would be criminally to not talk about this fragrance when you talk about the 2000s. I mean, Iris for men at this point was something new, you know, because I remember smelling this fragrance and I thought it was very feminine. But then I warmed up to it, and every time I wore this fragrance, it just made me feel like $1,000,000. You have the cocoa vibe here. You have the lavender, leather, vetiver, patchouli is really the star here, but it's done in a very, just a very compelling manner. It's just so beautiful, so stunning. This is a stunner juice. It's a head turning type of a fragrance. And it goes both ways. Even though it says Dior Homme, I think a lady could pull this off beautifully. There is a very Shalimar-esque vibe to this fragrance that I get. It's like a modernized version of Shalimar I get. Very groundbreaking for a men's fragrance, very metrosexual, very futuristic, almost ahead of its time, you know, for 2005. Not so much nowadays. You know, after 2010s, I think it was fitting, but 2005, it was right in the cusp of being perhaps a little bit ahead of its time. But absolutely stunning fragrance. You can't do a list like this without mentioning this. Absolutely groundbreaking, trendsetter. It opened the doors. Francois de Machy was the nose here. Was he also the nose of 2005 release?
No. It was Olivier Polge.
Olivier Polge then.
Yeah.
The reformulation is what I have here, but it was originally put together by Olivier Polge in 2005, which that would be your next pick, so you can take it away and talk about it as well.
Well, the thing that I need to explain was because some people may be saying, oh, but he said he's not going to put discontinued perfumes in, whereas Dior will maintain that this version is still available as one that they call Dior Homme Original, even though I guess we could have a conversation about whether it really is Dior Homme Original or not. But this was, you know, metrosexual is the word, and it was the time of the metrosexual, wasn't it? And I guess then that led into gender fluidity. Another one that I just wore endlessly, such a special blend, such a unique blend, you know, the carrot seed at the top, which goes so well with the iris. Really clever use of aldehydes, really clever use of those sort of baked fruit notes, like, you know, baked apple, that kind of feel to it. I wore this a lot. You've got a better supply of the Dior Homme Sport, the gingery one that they did, but I'm treasuring this because it's the silver stem that's the giveaway here, isn't it? And it's in good shape. And most of the Dior Homme line was good. I mean, I remember when the Intense version came out. That's really
amazing.
Good well. Some of the more recent ones, like, you know, the Cologne, and I lose track of the ones that they released. But no, this was an instant love for me as well. And I think it was my mum who introduced me to it. And I just thought, what the heck is this? This has to be another one for my collection. I'm going to be wearing this forever.
The funny thing is, you mentioned the carrot seed. I don't know if you get this, but I get a very similar vibe to Meander from Amouage because of this carrot seed. Of course, it goes into a different direction completely. It's a lot greener. It's a different fragrance, but there is a similarity, and I think it's because of this carrot seed vibe that I get with this fragrance. When you smell them, try to smell them side by side. You'll definitely get the similarities and resemblances with Meander and Dior Homme. But they go into different
I
directions.
hadn't thought that, but I'm sure you must be right. Absolutely. Yeah,
just a great fragrance.
That's an interesting one. No, Dior Homme is really, really special. And it's how wonderful that I think so far in every single one of the videos that I've done with you, there has been at least one Dior. That's been the sort of consistent brand.
Oh yeah.
throughout the 4 decades that we've done so far.
Dior, and I've said this before, I've said it many times, is my favorite designer brand of all time. You can't disregard Dior because they've been incredible. You know, I think that the three giants are Dior, Chanel, and Yves Saint Laurent. But I think Dior, you know, when you look at Poison, you look at women's releases, men's releases, I mean, they're just very consistent with great releases throughout the decades. Not to say that the other ones aren't, but I think they just, I mean, Fahrenheit, I mean, the list just goes on and on. Just it is my favorite, you know, designer. No, there's no question about it.
So that counts as
is it you or me?
4. No, so that counts as my number 4. So you should do your number 4 now.
All right. So this one here, you talked a lot about Bertrand Duchaufour, and I say that he's one of my favorites, you know, top 5 noses of all time. And of course, I had to have a Bertrand Duchaufour here. And Amouage is one of my favorite niche brands, definitely. Like I said, Reflection was my first introduction to the niche world of fragrance, but it's not Reflection, man. I'm talking about a Bertrand Duchaufour 2008 release, Jubilation 25 or Jubilation Man. I have a current formulation of a few years ago, I think 2015, it has the metal magnetic cap. This is an older ivory cap, which is a little bit stronger, a little bit longer in performance. But it's like, to me, the way to describe this is an Oriental fougere at its finest, because it takes elements from the original fougères, the oak moss, all that stuff that we come to love, and it adds all these beautiful honey, blackberry, silver frankincense, patchouli, ambergris, immortelle, which I love in fragrance because it gives you like a tobacco hay kind of a vibe. This is another one that my face lights up. It's like a fragrance fit for a king. It's royal, it's regal. It's another one that you want to drink. It's like a fine liqueur. It's a stunning fragrance. There has been nothing that I love more than this when it comes to Amouage. This is, to me, the best Amouage ever created. Just absolutely phenomenal. Coriander, cinnamon, cloves. I mean, it's got all the spices that I love in perfumery. Opoponax. It's resinous, it's spicy, and it has this green tinge to it. It goes into all these little directions, but it's blended and rounded to perfection. Just amazing. Amazing is the word. There's nothing so good as this. And I believe it has been reformulated a few times, because when I smell the current formulation, it's a little bit toned down, unfortunately, but it's still good. It retains the quality, it retains the, you know, the experience, but it's not as pungent. It's not as, you know, spicy as this was. What are your thoughts on Jubilation?
I love it. I love both of the Jubilations, actually. I think the women's one is also a really, really fascinating modern chic, and they were the first 2 that were done by the then creative director Christopher Chong. They were like his sort of his entree into the world of Amouage. No, really, really beautiful scents, both of them, and very, very Duchaufour, actually, that one.
Amazing, absolutely stunning. This is my favorite, I think, from Amouage of all time. Definitely number 1. Just incredible. So give us your 5th position here. This is your 5th or 4th? No, this is your 4th.
This is my 5th. This is my 5th, and you know, this was the decade where the independents started making a big name for themselves, and this is from a brand that could not be more independent. I don't like using the word niche so much, but you know, this really is the definition of niche, this brand, because this is just one guy initially in his house, blending things together, bottling them himself.
Tower?
Yes, absolutely, Andy Tower. Now, this is not the bottle that he originally used. I don't have this perfume in the original bottle. This is when he actually, you know, got a bespoke bottle made. So hey, you know, he was hitting the big time. But this is not only my favorite from Andy Tower, but it's one of my personal favorites ever. I love this stuff. This is the 3rd scent that he made. It's called Lone Star Memories from Tower Perfumes. Most people say that their favorite from Tower is L'air du désert marocain, the amber scent, which is great as well, but I prefer this. And this bottle's nearly over, actually, but I do have a backup. I can't ever be without this stuff. This probably has the Persolaise name written all over it, because in many ways it's a leather perfume. Very, very, very heavy on birch tar, you know, wonderful use of birch tar. So it's got that woody, smoky, campfirey feel. But what I love about this as well is that it just tells such a great perfumed story. It's got such a sense of development. And Andy Tower's own idea was that it's a cowboy. Andy has a fondness for Texas and for the deserts of the USA and those sorts of landscapes in the USA. So it's meant to be like a cowboy who's been working on the ranch and doing his cowboy thing all day. And then at the end of the day, he settles down by a campfire and he's brewing himself some coffee just to sort of round off the day. And then he kind of washes all of the day's grime off with some gently geranium scented soap. And you get all of that. You get the leather, you get the heat, you get the dust, you get the smoke, you get the physicality, you get the sweat, you get the campfire, you get the coffee feel. And then at the end, you get that beautiful floral geranium washing it all off. It's just stunning. It's a really divisive one. It's a real love-hate thing. I've sort of wafted it under some people's noses and they've gone, wow, what is that? I need that now. And some are like, get that stuff away from you right this second. I can't take this. But if you do fall for it, if it does work its charms on you, then it's just such magic, because it's already that balance of those different elements of the leather and the florals is so beautiful. So just somehow so delicate. This is like a cowboy with heart. I just adore it. I absolutely adore it. Do you know this one, Max?
I have not owned this one. I tried it, I think, a few times, and I've always pondered picking up a bottle because it is very nice. I do enjoy it, and I might pick up a bottle. I don't have many references from Tower, and the funny thing is you mentioned Tower, which we almost overlap because my last pick is going to be a Tower perfume.
Ah.
I just absolutely love his work, and I admire, where he comes from, because it's a very artistic approach. It's a very self-taught approach, and it's admirable. And he has produced some incredible fragrances over the years. He's definitely somebody that I look up to for his courage of trying things and being innovative. And the fragrance I'm talking about is one that you actually mentioned as being one of people's favorite, and it's L'Art du Désert Marocain. And this is also not the original bottle it came in. It came in the clear bottle, squared. It was different. This is a beautiful, angular, almost like a star. Just absolutely stunning juice. And what reminds me, it reminds me of course, like you said, the dry, arid air of the deserts, of Moroccan deserts. But it also has like the spice market. It has like the combination of both. And this is a masterpiece. This is another one that if I did a top 10 niche of all time that I couldn't live without, this would be it. I think this is like my third bottle, and this is already halfway gone. It is just stunning, but it's one of those fragrances, I agree with you, that if you spray and tell people to smell it, most people will say, get that out of here. It's too strong. It's too pungent. I can't take this. Extremely powerful. You have cumin, you have lavender, so it's a little bit hard to bear, especially in the first few minutes. But it transitioned beautifully, and it gives you this magical feeling. There's some floral notes here, geranium as well, like you mentioned with Lone Star, labdanum, jasmine, beautiful amber. I think he works very, very exquisitely with the note of amber. I love his fragrances because he's a master with like I talked about Maurice Roussel being a master with lavender. He's a master. Tower is a master with amber fragrances. Patchouli, vetiver, oak moss. So there's a green component in here. It is a powerful fragrance, but a very artistic fragrance that is just uncanny. There's nothing like this. What comes close to this, in my opinion, is Mitsa from Dior La Collection Privée. It's in the same kind of ballpark, but this is like times 10. It's that powerful, but it's a masterpiece. Do you like L'Art du Désert?
Absolutely, and I also love Andy's first one. I could have included his first one, Le Maroc pour elle, which is such a dangerous, mysterious, enigmatic jasmine. I love smelling it on Madame Persolaise. No, Andy, we're very lucky to have Andy, and I'm just so pleased that the 2 scents from him managed to get into this deck. If he sees the video, I'm sure he'll be touched and he'll be pleased.
He's a fantastic guy, and I want to leave it here for the record because I remember approaching Andy Tower. Now we're going back maybe 6-7 years ago, and I was starting my journey on reviewing and stuff, and I remember talking to him on Facebook, and he kind of brushed me off. He's like, your channel is a little too mainstream. you know, and that kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth. You know, I love the guy, and that's not going to change because I'm not somebody who holds grudges. But if he ever manages to watch this, you know, I want him to rethink that and, you know, reach out to me, or I'll cross paths with him somehow, somewhere. But yeah, he's a great nose. He's fantastic. And, you know, it is what it is. This is a great fragrance. There's no two ways about it. And he's a great nose.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, honorable mentions, so we can wrap this up and not make it too lengthy. So honorable mentions, I have Lolita Lempica Eau Masculine from 2000, Mugler Cologne from 2001, Gucci Pour Homme 1 from 2003, under the nose of, or the creative direction of Tom Ford, Armani Code 2004, Lalique Encre Noire 2006, beautiful, spicy, resinous, smoky vetiver, Terre d'Hermès, also 2006, Narciso Rodriguez for him, 2007, Mugler Pure Malt with a whiskey infusion, 2009, Yves Saint Laurent La Nuit de l'Homme and L'Homme, 2007, 2009, Chanel Allure Homme Sport, 2004, Fleur du Mal, Jean-Paul Gaultier, 2007, very underrated fragrance, Yves Saint Laurent Body Coros, 2000, Yves Saint Laurent Yves Gauche, 2003 pour Homme, and Dolce & Gabbana The One EDT 2008. And of course, 1 Million by Paco Rabanne 2008 gets a lot of flack, but it was groundbreaking in its own. And I have a niche here that I want to talk about. Bond number 9, New Harlem 2003. Two more. Givenchy Pour Homme 2002, which is not talked about at all. It's a great fruity vetiver. And last but not least, Canali for Men 2005. Another incredible decade, and there's a lot more here, but you know, just so this doesn't get too lengthy. How about your honorable mentions?
No, and exactly. I mean, you know, my list is long. I'm not going to go through all of it. This was also the time of the collections. You know, this is when Hermès released the Hermessence, and so many of them are great.
Oh.
Some of the ones that I had here, very, very quickly, that you haven't already mentioned. À la Nuit from Serge Lutens, 1740 from Histoire de Parfum, Alien from Mugler, Oud Cuir d'Arabie from Montal, Queer Amethyst and Bois d'Anson from Armani Privé, Bel Respiro from Chanel. I just kept picking it up and going, oh, do I include this? Do I include this? I mean, this was hard. Beyond Paradise from Estee Lauder, which I absolutely love. Borneo 1834 from Lutens. Two Man from Comme des Garcons. Geranium pour Monsieur, we talked about. Gucci pour Homme, we talked about. Idole from Lubin. Iris Poudre from Frederic Malle. Another one that I have to mention, because if I don't, certain members of my family may shoot me. État libre d'oranges, Rien, which nearly made
another incense.
Yes. Terre d'Hermès, you've already said. Tuscan Leather from Tom Ford. Tom of Finland from État libre d'orange. The garden collections from Hermès, you know, Jardin sur le Nil, Jardin après la Mousson. And another tower that nearly made my list, his Rose Chypre, which I absolutely adore. I mean, it's a good list. It's a good list. There was tons of rubbish released in that decade as well. But
yes,
lots and lots of good stuff too. Really, a lot of good stuff.
You probably think my honorable mention of 1 Million is one of those such rubbishes, right?
No. The original 1 Million, the original 1 Million, I have to say, even though
it was groundbreaking.
I didn't wear it. The original 1 Million was very, very appealing. And I know a lot of guys of, you know, who were like maybe early 20s then, who absolutely loved it and always wanted to receive it as a gift. It's a shame that they've changed the original one as well. But that smoky apple note was really good.
And by the way, I have a Bel Respiro here, EDT, which is an older, you know, original from the list. It's such a great scent. And I had it on my hand. I almost put it on the list as well. So it's really hard. And I think the 2010s are going to be even harder, because now I'm really deep into this. I'm you know, really doing a lot of stuff here with niche and just, you know, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to be fun. And it's a lot of fun to do this with you. And I can't wait to one day actually do this live in person and smell things and share some things that you don't know. And you know, and me also learning things that I don't know, because I'm sure you have a lot of things that I haven't tried, especially when it comes to niche. I think you are a lot more niche savvier than I am. But this was a great time. And again, always a pleasure to have you on the channel. Lovely. Hope you guys enjoyed the 2000s. And of course, stay tuned for the 2010s, which will be the final and closing chapter of this book of the decades in review, if you will. So, Persolaise, parting words here?
The pleasure is all mine. It's a real honor to be here, to be sharing these times with you. These videos get a lot of comments, they get a lot of feedback. It's really, really fascinating seeing people's reactions to them. But I reckon that this one and the 90s one is going to get a lot of comment, because there will be people chipping in with their own views, which is great. Leave comments and ask questions and tell us what you think.
Can't wait. We're definitely going to answer them. And of course, don't forget to tune in. Obviously, we're doing some live streams at the Persolaise's channel. And when we're doing that, it's live and you can interact and talk to us live as well. So stay tuned for those lives as well. And stay tuned for the 2010s, which will wrap up this series. Again, guys, thanks so much for being here with us. Remember, fragrance is emotion in motion. So wear what truly moves you. We'll see you again very soon. Take care.